There is a war going on in the EV market, and China is dominating. While American and European automakers struggle to cut costs, China is flooding the global market with electric cars that are cheaper, faster, and more advanced. In just one decade, China went from barely producing EVs to dominating over 50% of global sales. Its automakers are building cars that cost half as much as their American counterparts, and its battery industry controls the supply chain that Western manufacturers depend on. But how? How did China manage to pull ahead so quickly, and why are Western car companies falling behind? Can anyone stop China from taking over the future of the auto industry? And what does this mean to you and me, the customers? Let's find out. The EV takeover. In the early years, Chinese automakers were largely seen as second-tier manufacturers, producing lower-quality cars that couldn't compete with established brands from the United States, Germany, and Japan. The country was known for making budget-friendly vehicles, but lacked the reputation for innovation, reliability, and performance that consumers associated with Western and Japanese automakers. Many critics believed that China would never break into the global market in a meaningful way, let alone dominate it. However, the Chinese government had other plans. Recognizing that competing with legacy automakers in traditional internal combustion engines would be nearly impossible, policymakers turned their attention to a new and emerging sector: electric vehicles. Unlike gasoline-powered cars, which relied on decades of expertise in engine technology, electric vehicles represented a fresh playing field, one where China could build an advantage from the ground up. The Chinese government saw an opportunity not just to compete, but to lead, and it wasted no time in implementing a long-term strategy to make that happen. Germany, Japan, and the United States are struggling to keep up. While European and Japanese automakers were once hesitant to go all in on electric vehicle production, China aggressively pushed forward, flooding the market with affordable, high-quality EVs. This has resulted in a loss of market share for legacy brands that once dominated regions like Southeast Asia, Latin America, and even parts of Europe. In places like Brazil, Thailand, and South Africa, Chinese brands like BYD, NIO, and Geely are rapidly becoming household names, replacing the once untouchable dominance of Toyota and Volkswagen. Meanwhile, American automakers like General Motors and Ford are facing multiple challenges. The cost of producing EVs in the United States remains high, and many American consumers are still reluctant to switch due to concerns over charging infrastructure and affordability. While China is exporting millions of affordable EVs worldwide, the average price of an EV in the United States remains over $55,000, making them inaccessible to a large portion of the population. This shift in global auto power raises a critical question. Will China dominate the industry for the next 50 years? If the trends continue, the answer may very well be yes. China has mastered the entire EV supply chain, controls most of the world's battery production, and is investing heavily in autonomous driving technology and hydrogen fuel cells. Unless Germany, Japan, and the United States can find a way to regain their footing, China's auto dominance may be here to stay. But if one company represents China's success more than any other, it is BYD. The rise of BYD. When most people think of electric vehicles, the first name that comes to mind is Tesla. But in 2023, a Chinese company surpassed Tesla in global EV sales. And it is not a new player in the game. That company is BYD. Originally founded in 1995 as a battery manufacturer, BYD, short for Build Your Dreams, began as a small company supplying rechargeable batteries for mobile phones and laptops. Unlike legacy automakers who had to restructure their entire production process for EVs, BYD already had decades of experience in battery production before entering the auto industry. This advantage allowed it to develop its own battery technology, reduce production costs, and scale up faster than its competitors. Today, BYD is not just outselling Tesla in China, it is rapidly expanding into global markets. In 2023, BYD sold over 3 million electric vehicles, while Tesla sold about 1.8 million. The company is now making moves into Europe, Latin America, and Southeast Asia, aggressively targeting regions where Tesla has struggled due to high import tariffs and limited charging infrastructure. What makes BYD such a formidable competitor? First, it has complete control over its supply chain. Unlike Tesla, which relies on third-party suppliers for batteries and components, BYD produces everything in-house, from batteries to electric motors to semiconductors. This vertical integration allows BYD to keep costs low while maintaining high-quality production. Another major advantage is price. While Tesla focuses on premium EVs, BYD is producing affordable models that appeal to the mass market. The company's Seagull model, for instance, costs less than $11,000, making it one of the cheapest electric vehicles on the market. Meanwhile, the BYD Dolphin and Atto 3 models are gaining popularity in Europe and Australia, where Tesla's higher prices have limited its customer base. If BYD continues on its current trajectory, it may soon surpass Tesla as the most recognizable EV brand in the world. But BYD is not just focusing on the Western market. It is also capitalizing on a massive opportunity in emerging markets. The BRICS factor. While Western automakers focus on the US and European markets, China has turned its attention to emerging economies, and it is paying off. The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, represent some of the fastest growing economies in the world, and they are becoming key battlegrounds for the future of electric vehicles. China's EV expansion into Africa, South America, and Southeast Asia is happening at an unprecedented pace. Countries like Brazil and India, which were once dominated by Japanese and European automakers, are now embracing Chinese EVs due to their affordability and reliability. BYD, Chery, and Geely are setting up manufacturing plants in Brazil and Thailand, ensuring lower production costs and avoiding tariffs. The risks of this dependency are severe. If geopolitical tensions between the US and China escalate, access to Chinese batteries and materials could be restricted, leading to supply shortages and price spikes for Western automakers. Even with recent efforts to diversify battery production in the US and Europe, breaking away from China's dominance will take years, if not decades. As Western automakers scramble to reduce their reliance on China, governments are stepping in with aggressive trade policies. But will tariffs actually help or make the situation worse? Tariffs versus reality. To counter China's growing influence in the EV market, the US and European governments have introduced heavy tariffs and restrictions on Chinese-made electric cars. The goal is to protect domestic automakers, but these policies might end up harming them more than helping. The US recently raised tariffs on Chinese EVs from 25% to 100%, effectively doubling the price of any Chinese EV entering the US market. Europe has followed suit, implementing tariffs of up to 38% on Chinese EV imports. The logic is simple: make Chinese cars too expensive to compete with locally produced EVs. But here's the problem: tariffs don't fix the real issue. Even with restrictions on Chinese EVs, Western automakers still depend on Chinese batteries and raw materials. Blocking Chinese EV imports won't change the fact that American and European EVs rely on Chinese supply chains. In some cases, it could even increase production costs for domestic automakers, making it harder for them to compete in the long run. China has also found ways to bypass tariffs. One major strategy is building EV factories in Mexico and Europe. By assembling cars outside of China, companies like BYD and NIO can avoid direct tariffs while still selling their vehicles in Western markets. Mexico's low labor costs and proximity to the US make it a strategic location for Chinese automakers to enter the American market through the back door. The reality is that tariffs alone won't stop China's EV expansion. Instead of just blocking imports, Western governments need to invest more in local battery production, supply chains, and EV technology if they want to compete. Otherwise, they risk falling further behind as China continues to dominate the global EV market. But even if China succeeds in bringing its EVs to Western markets, there's one final question: will consumers actually buy them? The Consumer Dilemma surveys show that younger buyers are far more open to Chinese EVs than older consumers. Many younger drivers prioritize price, technology, and features over brand loyalty, making them more willing to consider a Chinese EV if it offers better value. However, older generations remain skeptical, largely due to concerns about safety, quality, and data privacy. One of the biggest fears surrounding Chinese EVs is data security. Many Chinese cars come equipped with advanced software, sensors, and internet-connected features, raising concerns about data collection and potential spying risks. Governments worry that allowing Chinese EVs on Western roads could give China access to sensitive consumer data and infrastructure insights. Despite these concerns, one thing is clear. If Chinese EVs are cheaper, have better range, and come with cutting-edge technology, they will be hard to resist. If Western automakers can't offer competitive alternatives, consumer demand could eventually shift in China's favor. With American and European automakers struggling to compete, what does this mean for the future of the global auto industry? The answer lies in how China is reshaping the global economy and why its EV dominance is just the beginning. The new auto superpower. For decades, the global auto industry was defined by three dominant forces: the precision engineering of Germany, the reliability of Japan, and the mass production strength of the United States. Brands like Volkswagen, Toyota, and Ford built the cars that shaped the modern world. However, a seismic shift is underway. China has now surpassed Japan as the world's largest auto exporter, marking a turning point in the industry's history. This transformation is not just about raw export numbers. It signifies a deeper restructuring of global economic power. In 2023, China exported more than 5 million vehicles worldwide, eclipsing Japan's 4.4 million. This rise is driven largely by electric vehicles, an area where China has leapfrogged traditional auto giants who were slow to embrace the transition from combustion engines. Beyond cars, cities across China have switched to fully electric bus fleets, with companies like BYD producing tens of thousands of units per year. This shift has had a dramatic impact not only on urban air quality, but also on reducing fuel dependency. Similar trends are emerging in the trucking industry, where Chinese companies are developing electric logistics trucks at an unprecedented scale. At the same time, Chinese technology giants like Xiaomi and Huawei are entering the EV space, bringing their expertise in software, artificial intelligence, and smart connectivity. These companies are not just building cars, they are creating ecosystems where vehicles are deeply integrated with mobile technology, smart homes, and cloud-based services. By investing in electric public transport, commercial vehicles, and smart EV technology, China is ensuring that its influence extends beyond just individual car buyers. It is shaping the future of transportation at every level, leaving Western automakers scrambling to catch up. With its dominance in battery production, manufacturing, pricing, and public transportation, China's rise in the EV industry is unstoppable. But the global response is only just beginning. Why American EVs are failing for decades? American automakers have dominated the roads with gas-powered vehicles, but their transition to electric cars has been anything but smooth. Companies like Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis have struggled to make electric vehicles affordable for the average American consumer. Despite massive government incentives and climate goals pushing for an EV revolution, the core issue, the cost of production remains too high, and consumer demand is not keeping pace with expectations. The Ford F-150 Lightning, the electric version of America's best-selling truck, is a prime example of these struggles. Despite initial excitement, sales plummeted in 2024, forcing Ford to cut back production. The reason? The price gap between electric and gas-powered vehicles remains too large. While a standard gas-powered F-150 starts at around $40,000, the Lightning's price tag is over $55,000. That difference makes it a tough sell for working-class Americans who rely on pickup trucks for daily use. Even with federal tax incentives, the total cost remains out of reach for many buyers. General Motors faces similar problems. The company once set ambitious EV production targets, but it has had to delay or cancel several EV models due to production challenges and lower than expected demand. GM originally planned to build 400,000 EVs between 2022 and 2024, but fell short due to supply chain issues and slower adoption rates. The Chevy Bolt, one of the most affordable EVs in the US, was discontinued despite strong sales, leaving fewer budget-friendly options for consumers. The core issue is production costs. Roughly 40% of an EV's cost comes from the battery, and American automakers struggle to compete with China's cheaper manufacturing and streamlined supply chain. Even as battery costs decline, the challenge remains. How can American automakers build a high-quality EV at a price point that competes with gas-powered vehicles? With Ford and GM struggling to balance affordability with production costs, the future of American EVs looks uncertain. Without major breakthroughs in cost reduction, traditional U.S. automakers risk falling even further behind in the global EV race. While Ford and GM struggle to make affordable EVs, they also face another harsh reality: their dependence on Chinese technology. The China dependency. In the race to build EVs, Western automakers have found themselves trapped in a paradox. They want to compete with China, yet they can't produce EVs without Chinese batteries and raw materials. This dependency is one of the biggest weaknesses of the Western auto industry, making it nearly impossible to gain a competitive edge. The reason is simple. China controls the EV battery supply chain. Nearly 75% of the world's battery production happens in China, and over 80% of critical minerals like lithium, cobalt, and graphite are processed there. Western automakers, including Tesla, Volkswagen, and BMW, all rely on Chinese manufacturers like CATL and BYD for their battery supply. Tesla, for example, sources batteries from CATL, the world's largest battery manufacturer. Even though Tesla is a dominant player in the EV industry, it can't fully escape China's supply chain. Volkswagen and BMW face similar challenges. Despite efforts to build battery plants in Europe and North America, they still depend on China for raw materials and key components. Massive government subsidies became the foundation of China's electric vehicle revolution. Beginning in the early years of the 21st century, China poured billions of dollars into research, development, and production. Automakers that invested in electric vehicle production received direct financial support, tax incentives, and access to cheap land and loans. This allowed new startups and established manufacturers alike to rapidly scale up operations, developing competitive electric models faster than their Western counterparts. Meanwhile, local governments played a crucial role in expanding the adoption of EVs by electrifying taxi and bus fleets, making electric vehicles a visible and practical choice for everyday transportation. Western automakers largely dismissed China's early efforts, assuming that its electric vehicles would remain low quality and confined to the domestic market. However, this was a miscalculation. By the time the rest of the world recognized the seriousness of China's ambitions, the country had already gained a dominant position in EV production, sales, and technology. Today, China is the largest producer and consumer of electric vehicles, exporting millions of units worldwide and reshaping the future of the auto industry. But China's success in electric vehicles wasn't just about building cars. It was about controlling the most valuable component of an EV: the battery empire. The real key to winning the EV war lies not in the cars themselves, but in the technology that powers them: the battery. While automakers worldwide have shifted toward electric vehicles, the ability to produce high-quality, cost-effective batteries has become the single most important factor in determining which companies and countries dominate the industry. China realized this early on and took steps to secure control over the entire battery supply chain, ensuring that it would remain the leader in EV production for decades to come. At the heart of China's battery dominance is its control over raw materials. The main components of lithium-ion batteries, lithium, cobalt, nickel, and graphite, are scarce and difficult to mine. While these minerals are found in various locations around the world, China has spent the past 2 decades investing heavily in mining operations across Africa, South America, and Southeast Asia. By acquiring ownership stakes in mines and securing long-term supply contracts, Chinese companies have positioned themselves as gatekeepers of the global battery market. However, controlling the raw materials is only part of the equation. China also leads the world in battery refining and manufacturing. While countries like the United States and Australia mine significant amounts of lithium, they often lack the infrastructure to refine it at scale. China, on the other hand, has built an extensive network of refining facilities, allowing it to process raw materials efficiently and at lower costs. As a result, even Western automakers that source minerals from outside China often have no choice but to send them to Chinese companies for refining and battery production. With the cost of batteries driving the overall price of EVs, China has been able to do something that Western automakers have struggled with: make electric cars affordable. The price war Chinese automakers have perfected the art of mass production, leveraging economies of scale to bring down costs. Unlike legacy automakers, which are transitioning from gasoline-powered cars to EVs, Chinese manufacturers have built their entire production systems around electric vehicles. This means they don't have to deal with the expensive process of overhauling factories, retraining workers, and reconfiguring supply chains. Instead, they have been able to focus on efficiency and cost-cutting from day one. The impact of this pricing strategy has already begun reshaping the industry. Chinese EV makers have introduced models that are significantly cheaper than their Western counterparts, making them attractive not just in China, but in international markets as well. Some Chinese electric cars sell for less than half the price of equivalent US or European models. Western automakers have found themselves trapped in a difficult position. If they try to compete on price, they risk losing billions of dollars per year. If they don't, they risk losing market share to Chinese competitors. Meanwhile, the Chinese government continues to provide strong support to its domestic automakers, allowing them to weather economic fluctuations and continue expanding aggressively. But China's ambitions in the EV space go beyond just passenger cars. The country is revolutionizing the entire transportation industry with electric buses, trucks, and even motorcycles. Why are these nations choosing China over the West? One key reason is cost. Western automakers simply cannot compete with Chinese EV prices, making it difficult for them to gain traction in these markets. Additionally, China is investing in local partnerships, government subsidies, and infrastructure development, making it easier for consumers in these regions to adopt electric vehicles. Could the BRICS nations create a new EV trade alliance outside of the United States and Europe? It is not out of the question. As China continues expanding its EV market dominance, it is also strengthening economic ties with emerging markets, reducing dependence on Western automakers. If BRICS countries begin aligning their EV policies, it could create a parallel auto market that operates independently of Western influence. As China continues to dominate EV infrastructure, the next battlefield may not even be about electric cars. A new wave of innovation is already on the horizon, and the winners of tomorrow will be the ones who embrace it first. The next big innovation. While the electric vehicle revolution is still unfolding, China is already preparing for the next technological leap. As Western automakers struggle to keep up with current EV trends, China is moving beyond lithium-ion batteries and exploring next-generation energy solutions that could redefine the future of transportation. One of the most promising technologies is solid-state batteries. Unlike conventional lithium-ion batteries, solid-state batteries promise higher energy density, faster charging times, and longer lifespans. Several automakers, including Toyota, Volkswagen, and BMW, are investing heavily in this technology, but China is rapidly catching up. If Chinese companies manage to mass-produce solid-state batteries before Western competitors, they could gain yet another technological edge in the global auto market. At the same time, China is aggressively developing hydrogen fuel cell technology. While electric vehicles have taken the spotlight, hydrogen-powered cars offer an alternative path to reducing carbon emissions, especially for heavy-duty vehicles like trucks and buses. China has already invested billions in hydrogen infrastructure, building fueling stations and developing commercial vehicles powered by fuel cells. If hydrogen becomes a viable alternative to battery-powered EVs, China could once again position itself as a global leader in the next phase of the clean energy transition. But what if the future of transportation is not just about better batteries? Some experts believe that autonomous driving and AI-powered vehicles will be the next frontier. China is rapidly integrating artificial intelligence into its EVs, developing fully autonomous systems that could revolutionize personal and public transportation. With massive government backing, China's automakers are positioning themselves at the forefront of the self-driving revolution, while Western competitors struggle with regulatory hurdles and technical challenges. But if China continues to dominate the EV market, could this battle escalate into something even bigger? Some experts warn that the EV war is not just an economic struggle, it could become a new front in global geopolitics. Could the EV war trigger a new Cold War? China's dominance in the electric vehicle industry is not just reshaping the global economy, it is shifting the balance of geopolitical power. As the United States and Europe scramble to counter China's rise, some fear that the battle over EVs could escalate into a full-blown economic war. The auto industry is one of the largest sectors in the world, and its transformation has massive implications for national security, energy independence, and global trade. The fact that China controls most of the raw materials, battery production, and EV supply chains gives it an unprecedented level of influence over global transportation. If tensions between China and the West continue to escalate, access to these materials could become a major point of contention, leading to trade restrictions, economic sanctions, and even supply chain disruptions. Already, we are seeing signs of a brewing economic conflict. The United States has imposed steep tariffs on Chinese EVs, and the European Union is following suit. Meanwhile, China is responding by expanding its influence in emerging markets, building EV factories in countries like Mexico, Brazil, and Thailand to bypass Western restrictions. This tit-for-tat strategy could lead to a global standoff, where nations are forced to choose between aligning with China or the West in the EV supply chain. But is a full-scale economic war inevitable? Some believe that collaboration is still possible. If the West can negotiate fair trade agreements, invest in domestic EV production, and diversify its supply chain, it may be able to compete with China without resorting to outright conflict. However, if tensions continue to rise, we could see a future where the EV market becomes another battleground in an increasingly divided global economy. The race for electric vehicle dominance is far from over, but one thing is clear: China has changed the game forever. Will Western automakers find a way to fight back, or is China's control over the EV industry now unstoppable? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.